I'm joined today for another conversation with the host of Primeval Fantasy podcast and YouTube channel. And we have it upon us to discuss, well, getting people on the same page. When we have a specific goal in mind for play, or when we have a specific taste that we're looking to meet, how is it that we actually go from the desire to getting people around the table to actually do that thing? So that's what our conversation is for today. So welcome, Daniel. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks. Great to talk with you again.
All right. So since the last time we talked, has anything new transpired in the realms of imagination on your end?
No, I'm in the digging the ditch with a spade. Uh, a part of everything I work on feels like that right now, and that's just natural. Like when you're editing, I'm editing the text for Primeval Fantasy, and it's just a lot of work. Perhaps the biggest part of that energy is preventing myself from saying, what if I do X and Y to the system? I have to smack myself, right in the forehead and just no, stop it,
No
finish
more
and
changes.
release. Yeah. 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 There's all that temptation's always there. So,
Yeah.
yeah, daily work on that. That's pretty much it.
All right. And remind me, how long has your current group been playing together?
The people I play with right now, most of them 20 years.
Okay. So a fair
Others,
length of time.
yeah, 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 that's right. Um, the uh, the one gal who plays with us has only been for like 3 or 4 years, but yeah, everyone else, yeah. And then I don't even consider those are still the quote unquote new group.
Right, the new guys.
The old group is 32 years, 35
Right.
years, whatever. Yeah.
Do you also still play with the old group?
Just periodically, I have one of my old high school friends and we play on Zoom,
Okay.
but we haven't for the past several months. But that's always great also, but it's different.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So the last recruitment drive was 3 or 4 years ago.
It wasn't even that, it was just incidental. As a general rule, gave up on finding people that I think would, game well together.
Mhm.
But to be fair, I have also haven't tried. So
Right.
yeah,
There's only so many hours in the day. There's only so much.
yeah,
And
yeah,
if you have a group, the desire to mess with it, I
right,
think is one of those things. Is it the
right.
red wire or is it the blue wire? So in my case, I've been gaming with the same group of guys pretty regularly for a number of years. Online, we have a different group that plays offline, where we don't record the sessions, so that it could just be
Yeah.
it can just be fun. But recently, starting the Call of Cthulhu campaign that we've been slowly releasing the sessions for, uh, we have uh, totally new players that we haven't played with before, people that I've never had gaming conversations with and have never played with before, people I've had conversations with about gaming, but we've never played before, people that I played with a lot and we're playing in a slightly different way, and people that I haven't played with for a while, where we know we have divergent tastes, but are now coming around to try and play the same way. So it's a pretty interesting
Yeah, you're across the board.
situation to be in all in
Yeah,
one game.
yeah.
Kind of thing. But okay, so when you think about getting people together to play in a particular way, what, how to put it, what are the concerns or the criteria that come to mind first for you?
So I would I would start off by saying that if you're talking with people who have played together or before, especially those who played for a long time, there you're going to walk into a minefield of potential conflict because when people play for a long time, they inherited and then built on a bunch of habits, most of which they're not aware of. And like all of these hidden presuppositions about how the game should be played.
Mm,
And so, so then you have your body of presuppositions and my body of presuppositions. And what I've seen happen a lot through the years is people will say, "Well, let's just play together," and then they'll sit down, and then they're confused when all these conflicts arise. Like, how could this possibly happen? And maybe this is from we're what is it that so that you have the original gamers who were adults in the 70s, and then my generation. Um, Munchkins. We were the Munchkin players. So we were the
right,
little kids who picked it up. And so anyway, back in the day, long before the internet existed, um, you only had your little group of people based on where you lived. So,
right,
where I lived, there wasn't this, place you go to where there's 8 groups of different players. You just had your friends and your friends, and no one knows who introduced us to D&D. It just happened, right? And you start
right,
playing. So, it could be that old presupposition of, okay, friends get together and let's play like you do with Monopoly. Maybe that's where the habit came in. But anyway, it's nowadays it's a ludicrous proposition to say, hey, stranger who's been playing in your own groups, we'll play together and we'll somehow magically mesh with all of our presuppositions and habits. That's just never going to happen, right?
right,
Um, Not even with something so straightforward, ostensibly as like Monopoly or Risk or whatever, right?
right.
Um,
There's still house rules out there.
yeah,
Yeah,
right, right. I didn't know until I was in my 30s that everyone plays Monopoly wrong. If you compare it to what's written down, like no one
yeah,
follows that. No one reads
yeah,
those. But yeah, so anyway, I mean that's a huge hurdle, right? Yeah,
right,
you have all these that's why the easiest is to find people who have never role played together. Or no, I'm sorry, never role played and be like, okay, here's what we do. Because now, you pass on your tradition or your presuppositions,
sure,
and there's, no conflict. But that's the exception to the rule.
right, and
Yeah.
and maybe easier at certain points in our lives, like when we're very young, it's easier, and when we are transitioning to a new phase of life, like going to university or something along those lines, or entering the retirement home,
Right. God.
that kind of thing. Maybe we'll have that opportunity for that fresh mix
Hmm.
of newcomers. But I don't know. I've often liked to have large groups whenever possible, and living over here in Korea, it's not always been possible, but there have been times where the group has slowly accrued, you know, as people come in for their 1 year or 2 year contracts, they've become temporary parts of the group, and the size of the group has swollen up from 4 people to 5 to 6 to 7, and all of these people are coming with varying degrees of experience from none. When we started playing the Fantasy Flight games, Star Wars, a significant number of the people in the group had never played any role playing game before, and
Hmm.
the other part of the group had only played um, different editions of D&D. And there was one guy in the group who had played the old original version of the Aliens RPG when it was new and he was very young.
Hmm.
So it was a pretty clean slate. Everyone had had at least tangential connection to the concept of role playing games, whether that was a computer version or something along those lines. But that whole group had not role played together before, and many of them had never held role playing dice of any description together before.
Hmm.
And so it was, like you say, it was quite easy to get that group pulling in the same direction.
Hmm.
Um, but using that group as an example, I stepped back from the idea of purely communicating my my culture of play or my preferences for play,
Hmm.
and I took it as an opportunity to see what would settle out with this group of newcomers. Right? We had an actor in the group, so very outgoing, actual professionally trained actor in the group. We had a lot of educational professionals in the group. We had a lawyer. We had a couple of shy people, and we played in public in a coffee shop on
Wow.
Saturday afternoons. So it was loud. There's music playing in the background. It's like everything
Yeah.
I hate about
Right. I don't think
everything
I
I
could
hate.
do that. Yeah. I don't think unless
And
unless I bribed them to bum rush everyone out and lock the doors, I don't think I could.
right. So we still found our way into that
Hmm.
that far away galaxy and to have some fun and came pretty close to a satisfying level of in character play for me. Everyone thinking of their character as I, and generally speaking from that position, not taking on a third person role, but also not shying away from talking about the mechanics, right? Because people were new and they were unsure of, is this when we do the thing, and which
Right.
dice do I need, and that kind
Sure.
of stuff. So to make it
Hmm.
really friendly, we always had the book on the table. You could look at it as you need to, and each different player was given the responsibility of knowing how their special skills and abilities worked.
Hmm.
Uh, so it was nice to be able to try that approach on for
Hmm.
size and have success with it. I can see scenarios where you could try the exact same setup and it just leading to arguments or personality clashes or
Sure.
whatnot. But this particular group was invested in working together to have a good time. But, so with the Call of Cthulhu group, I decided I wanted to try that again in a way. So we have solo players and we don't think of it as a team, but anyway, pairs and trios of players who, like I said, we haven't played together before.
Hmm.
So the first period that has felt like one whole session of play, like we're playing multiple times for like 90 minutes to 2 hours at a go.
Hmm.
So at the point where we reached 6 to 8 hours of play was the part where we started to talk about how's it going for you, like checking in with is there anything you'd like to change, and how do you feel about the way that I, as the keeper of arcane lore, am presenting the rules to you, and that sort of thing. But that first quote unquote investigation was left largely without an explicit statement of this is how we shall play. It
Right.
was, let's play and see what happens. It's been kind of interesting, the the culture of play that's developing and the reactions that we're having to it.
Hmm.
So that puts you and I in alignment a little bit in that this particular campaign was predicated on the idea of minimizing as much as possible the impact that the rules would have on the in character experience.
Hmm.
So, um, not to the point where I'm taking on all of the roles for them so that they can have an unbroken experience,
Hmm.
but to the point where um, I think where a lot of people will choose to invoke the game system because it's fun to roll dice.
Hmm.
We're not doing that. We're instead invoking the competence of the character and saying at this moment it's not necessary to roll dice
Right.
because your character is good enough to achieve it. And when they're not good enough to achieve it, then it's, some version of please roll.
Right.
Yeah. So it's this area where our conversation will begin as players. Like, how much do you like this experience of minimizing the impact? Would you like to continually refer to the system? Like, do you require it to have fun to play?
Hmm.
Or would you like to, dial it down even more? Would you like me to take on more of the system things? Or would you like to develop coded language? So when you hear a certain passphrase, you'll know that I'm calling for a roll and you will
Right.
respond and give me a passphrase. And so we never have to stop, communicating in an in character way,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Right.
We're moving into those waters, right? How to get on the same page in those very specific game terms.
Now, have you tried any games, whether solo, I mean, one-on-one or otherwise, where the players had where you did full player opacity? Have you tried that yet?
I haven't tried it in this campaign intentionally.
Hmm.
There have been sessions where it's worked out that way simply because of what their characters did and experienced.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
No rolling was necessary. No discussion of
Mechanics.
stats or
Yeah.
points or anything was needed. It was one conversation after another. Now
Hmm.
that still had me observing their character sheets and their relative levels of competence relative to the task at hand and making a
Hmm.
decision. So I'm still using the system, but
Hmm.
they didn't have to experience it. So it has taken place.
Hmm.
There have been other sessions where I've intentionally gone into it very relaxed to provide contrast, and we have out of character uh, banter with each other. I call for a named roll. Give me a psychology roll, and they say, "Oh, I got a 65." And all right, we've played that way for contrast purposes. So you can look at one session and
Hmm.
see one way of play, and then you see the exact same people with the exact same characters in the exact same situations playing it in a different way.
Hmm.
And, so we've got both things going on. Like the pendulum is swinging
Hmm.
back and forth. But I think there's a reason to ask that question.
Well, I mean, I mean, through the years, I didn't embrace full player opacity, except over the past like 2 or 3 years. Um, and it's funny. So many years ago, 20 years ago, longer, maybe even, um, we started working on unifying, player perception with character perception. But the
Right.
first stage of that would have just been like, you're looking for, um, someone in the woods. Even as teenagers, we realized if I, the player, roll this, I've just kind of damaged my experience. Okay, I
Right.
know that I know more than my character. And so even as teenagers, we realized that something was wrong there. Or
Yeah.
something was counterproductive. And then, through
Some
the years
roles
of
needed to
playing,
be made by someone else. Yeah.
yeah, they need to be hidden, right? And maybe it worked out so well because we were all friends from our teen years. We were all it was just accidental. We were all theater kids.
Oh,
I don't talk about my theater kidness because it's been so long, but I was a very serious thespian for a long time. Um, and so anyway, we all trusted each other to, not screw the player, quote unquote. But
right.
in any case, as the years passed, I realized that the more that you do this, the better. Um, as far as like reaching that unity, that mental unity. If I'm looking for a bag of gold, I don't want to know what I just rolled. I mean, that you just ruined my search, right?
Yeah.
If my goal was I want to get the gold, then I don't care if I see it or not. If my goal is I want to be my character who really wants the gold, now it matters.
Now it
Now
matters. Yeah.
hide everything from me. So, anyway, it was only in the past 2 or 3 years that I actually tried absolute opacity. And my fear of trying it was really irrational. It's the same kind of fear you have when you're at whatever age and you've never seen, let's just say, D&D played before, and you look at someone who's a DM and you're like, how can you handle all those monsters and all their armor classes and hit points and bonuses? No one could ever do this. Don't try. And what's funny is that that's the same psychology I had with full opacity. Like,
Sure.
and you hear people say, the first object, not the first, one of the early objections to people talking about this is, oh, you could never handle that. You have to handle all their attacks and their and wounds and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, come back to me after you've tried it, and then we can discuss it. Because before now, there's not even a discussion. There's just a presupposition. And
Right.
so I think it was Che from Role Play Rescue who was really encouraging me to push the envelope all the way because I was at that like 70% mark with regards to opacity, and
Right.
so I pushed it to 100. Best campaign experience ever for the players. They felt there's something about the 70% mark to the 100% mark, and maybe that's even true of 90%. I don't know, but I think that something psychologically happens where once you go to the 100% mark, it's like a submarine with no leaks in it. Um, and so, and of course, I should reiterate this is all about the kind of player who wants this specific immersive experience, this specific
Sure.
total one-to-one, as much as we can get it, experience.
Right.
Um, but yeah, once I went to 100% opacity, all the players noticed a serious difference.
So let's talk about that a little bit, like in terms of if we were recruiting other players to play that way,
Mhm.
right? So we'd have to explain it to them. If they didn't recognize instantly what we were talking about, we'd have to explain it. So let's say you've been running the game, as you say, at 70% opacity, right? So that means 30% of system related things are in the hands of the player. So what things would those have been in those days?
That would have definitely been everything combat related. Their attack in Primeval Fantasy, you actively defend, and so
Mm-hmm.
that has its own numbers. Your wounds, your impairments from your wounds. that was the bulk of that 30% that remained in their hands. Um,
So what was hidden from them? Things like the um, well, we talked about already searching and perception and
yeah,
initiative
anything.
like that.
Um, physical initiative that was in their hands at that time. But yeah, anything like perception related, I'm searching for X. I'm interacting with NPCs and um, so let's see if you're trying to guess whether someone is lying to you or not, that was out of their hands as well. That was not in there. That was one of the early
Sure.
things to get rid of because it's perception with regards to another person or what have you. Um, Magic was a mixture taken out of their hands for spellcasters at that time, which were always the minority. It was rare to have spellcasters, um, or I should say, it was rare to have any more than one person as a spellcaster. But anyway, back then, the spellcaster would have seen everything that the spell does. I use a spell point system, so how much it cost, its effects, and so forth. And so that they were privy to all of that back then.
Right. So they could
And
make
with
tactical decisions about, and they would know I'm not able
yeah,
to, I don't have enough points left to cast this one. You don't have enough points
yeah,
to fly. Right. Yeah, that kind of
right,
thing.
right. What's funny is at some point it was really like doing your taxes. So one of my friends, he had a very powerful mystic, and like he had a calculator and he was counting if I want to do these like 8 spells in conjunction to reach this goal, and he was having to crunch numbers, and we laugh about it now. It's just so antithetical to what we want. Um,
Sure.
but yeah, but back then we thought it was necessary. We thought that the player had to have that I couldn't handle it, but turns out that's not true.
There's a flip side to that coin. Not that
Mhm.
you can't handle it side, but the um, players can find a use for it. Um, and I don't mean in the penetrating through to the secrets way. Like I've rolled my stealth check or whatever, and I see that
Yeah.
I'm successful, and so now I'm going to role play the success. I don't mean that per se,
Mhm.
but the what when we've talked about this in the past, the word that comes up is that it's an analog for the thing that you're doing. It's a way to in almost kinetically or physically connect to the action the character's taking. Like I roll the die, and that's a thrust of the sword, or it's the incantation of the spell,
Mhm.
or what have you. There's a way for it to work like sympathetic magic in a sense to summon up the feelings. But as attractive as that is, when taken away with the right procedures of play, with the right engagement of, what am I going to do as a player to represent the attack, to represent the defense, to represent the casting of the spell, to represent the searching for a hidden safe, or what have you. That thing is still an analog for what it is that we're imagining. It's just we're exchanging a roll of dice, or a quick stab at the calculator. We're exchanging it
Yeah.
for something else. And what have you seen manifest as that uh, in play?
Yeah, for that. So the it's going to be pure description. And so everything, and this happens with a lot of players now, they will be describing and rolling, or describing and, subtracting spell points, let's say. But when everything shifts fully away from the meta, because those are all meta activities, their quote unquote gamey activities.
Right.
And I mean, this is also another problem. Just the very semantics of game come into play and pretty much derail most conversations. Well, at least on social media, but they're doomed anyway. Um,
Yes, it takes effort to corral
yeah, yeah,
specific meaning for a
yeah,
useful
sure.
length of time.
Yeah, that exactly. Yeah. But so let me tell you this. So in my most recent campaign where I was using full opacity, and one of my players is some kind of a mystic, his description to me was that because he has no sheets saying here's this spell and the cost, he has lists of things he can do, but he's not sure exactly what they do in the old way. In the old way, it was, cause X points of damage or, do X function for X period of time. And now it's something, it's only given to him in the same way that his character understands it, right?
Right.
So his relaying the experience to me is this time I can feel myself doing it, quote unquote. So like when he's out in the his character's out in the woods and he makes the vines and the weeds grab someone. What he has relayed to me is that he feels it happening in a way that he didn't before with his other casters because of the I know this cost 18 spell points and I know it's going to last for 8 seconds or what have you. um and so this goes back to the switching cost, and my guess is that even though we were at 70% for a long time, those last 30% took the switching cost from 50 to 0.
Right. So,
And maybe that
what can you do
matters.
with that? Yeah, what can you do with that
Yeah,
extra
yeah,
focus? Right.
right.
You can choose to imagine, your imagination can build uh, over time or be sustained over time in ways that you
Hmm.
probably weren't aware. Right. Like I've
Yeah.
met people who are clearly imagining and processing at the same time, but I think I've met a lot more people who are imagining and then they put that on hold. They can return to it, but then they process whatever needs to be processed or they communicate whatever needs to be communicated. And then later on, when they get swept up in the description again and they resume imagining, right?
Hmm.
I've played with people who only imagine the cool parts, and I've played with people who imagine everything. And but in most cases of play, there's always something that comes along from the system that requires your attention. If you take that away from a person who's never played before, then they've lost nothing.
Right,
They don't know any better. But
right.
if we take it away from someone who expects it,
Hmm.
then I think a common reaction would be, if not fear or nervousness, that's those words feel too strong, but there's that sense of, well, what would I actually do? Are we just going to sit around and talk to each other? Right? There's that kind of awkward part of it.
Hmm.
Um, which comes up even in something like what I'm proposing in the Call of Cthulhu campaign, where all we're doing is saying, the game master, the keeper, is going to take a look at the skill level that the character has, and if there's sufficient time and there are no negative circumstances weighing down on that particular level of ability, then success will be assumed.
Yeah, I don't find that controversial at all. I think that that's common sense.
Me too. and yet
Yeah,
and yet
I mean,
there's
you are going to
pushback
have
in
people
some quarters.
who love the old miniature gaming, wargaming components so much that, and I believe that a lot of people's habits are unconscious. Well, that's true of all of us, right? In
Sure, yeah.
every ever our lives. I mean, we make it through life because we have all these unconscious habits. I
That's
I
right.
don't think about how to take a shower. I just do
Right.
it because I've done it 8 trillion times.
Yeah.
And so with gamers, and they say, "Oh, you take away my dice. You've taken away my." It's like I've broken into their house and stole some precious heirloom.
Right.
Um, and going back to the original topic, getting on the same page. This is why the first protracted conversation with people needs to be, what experience do you really want? And strip it down and dissect it and finally pinpoint it. And sometimes, and again, this can't happen on social media. It can only happen in serious conversations. Um, but like, my where I landed was I know exactly what I want because I spent too long thinking about it and playing with people who did the same. And then, I slew all my sacred cows.
Right.
I'm a board gamer. I'm a nerd. I've made a couple of board games that I love. I love miniature wargaming. I love rolling the dice. I love crunching the numbers and exploiting the system. I get it. I love all of that. But when I pinpointed what I want for role playing, which is a deeply like immersive connection with my character in a solid world, I had to kill those sacred cows. And
Right.
those sacred cows were dice and as a player, rolling dice and
Right.
such. Yeah.
Yeah. If I know what I want, then that opens the door to figuring out what I need to do to get it.
Yeah.
It's the answer is not revealed like holy text or something like that, but it's the
Yeah.
it's okay. What worked, what sessions do I remember that were awesome, what sessions do I remember which were the exact opposite of awesome, what things that happened in common and so are therefore irrelevant, what special things happened and are they reproducible, and and moving from there, being willing to talk is a great way to discover them.
Mhm.
Introducing all of this to an
Yeah.
experienced player, I think we run a real risk of, instead of communicating the thing that we want to communicate, this is the goal that the established players in the group have identified. This is the methodology that we're using. I think we run a real risk of not explaining but justifying
Hmm.
what we're doing, which then can easily cascade into complaining about or predicting predicting complaints from the listener and trying to head them off at the pass. Now I know what you're thinking,
Well, a lot of
and
mine
you're
comes from
wrong.
experience. I mean, I've gotten, once since I started pushing opacity, I get the same um objections, and they're usually uninformed objections. They're usually
Sure,
from those who have not actually considered the subject matter.
right?
So yeah, some of that is reflex. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean this is how do we get people on the same page? When I have talked about just in character play, compared to um, playing in a more authorial stance, where we're making decisions on the story layer about how the story is going to go. Well, what if my character knew this guy in this place who could connect us to the thing? Wouldn't that be cool? Yeah, that'd be cool. Let's do that. That kind of play,
Hmm.
shifting out of that play into that more, as you're describing it, the one-to-one unity of perspective between the player and the character. As I describe it, playing in character as character. When I suggest that,
Hmm.
I can get pushback,
Hmm.
right? And I say, well, you can't do that 100% of the time because. questions need to be asked, or dice need to be rolled, or we have to learn the system, or legitimate complaints or legitimate
Sure.
reactions. But there's
Hmm.
also the habitual, I'm not familiar with that, I've never tried that, it doesn't seem likely,
Right.
and so I'm going to push back against it. Don't make me
Right.
change.
Right.
And
Yeah, change is
and if you
uncomfortable. Yeah.
yeah, and if you
I
don't want
recall.
the change,
Yeah,
then I'm
that's
fine
right.
with that.
Right. Right.
I'm fine. But anyway, I
I
cut you off.
no, I just I recall I was studying this is a full 15 years ago, where even so if you fold your hands in the normal way, right?
Right.
And it feels normal. Now rotate your digits just one. It feels so wrong, you can't concentrate on anything else.
Right.
And I think they did experiments where they were having them like solve puzzles, keeping their hands like this, and the distraction level was so high it impeded it to some percentage.
Right.
But yeah, that I mean that's the way we are. We're so bound to our habits. Yeah.
Sure. There's the, if it if it has not been broken, why should I fix it?
Right.
And
Yeah.
and lots of things. Um, I really enjoy role playing games. Why mess with it? Well, you might enjoy it more, and it does. It can definitely sound like the slippery slope. You know, like people are hearing, "Well, I really enjoy being married." Yes, but you could enjoy it more if you experiment with these other marriages, and then you'll find the real marriage. It's
Right.
like, no, this is
Yeah.
not the argument we're having. We're talking about,
Right.
I like ice
Yeah.
cream.
Yeah.
Should I only eat one flavor of ice cream?
Yeah.
It's not your
Or
identity, it's not your
yeah.
commitment, it's your,
Yeah. I imagine if I had never tried espresso, so I started off with coffee and only years later tried espresso, and now espresso's it. I don't even want coffee anymore.
right,
So I mean, yeah, that's the initial conversation. These initial conversations we're describing are so easy for people who've never played together, and after that, it's a question of personality. So some
sure,
people are more open-minded, they're more open to trying things. And you're not going to convince someone who likes being staunch and likes being irrational, which is the majority of people in the majority of circumstances. People get off on being irrational and sticking to their guns, quote unquote. Um, and so Bruce Lee was the one who told us be like water.
yeah,
I mean, he was quoting something from what 3,000 years ago,
yeah,
um, but yeah, be like water. To get what you want, be like water. Yeah.
yeah. Which is interesting, you know, and be attentive, like some interesting experiences I've had is where I have felt I've met someone open minded that's willing to try and experiment. So when I was playing all kinds of different games, some of which I liked a lot, and some of which really did nothing for me, right? But they were important to play and experiment with and
Right.
experience. I was playing with people that were quite excited about playing these games with me, and so I took that unthinkingly or uncritically as being open minded. But in some of these cases, they didn't care. The game, whatever we were playing, when whatever it produced, was completely unimportant to them. What they were there for was the distraction or the camaraderie or what we did after,
Hmm.
right? They'd play the
Sure.
game so that we would go out and eat afterwards, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And I didn't notice it as much at the time because the groups were quite large, but as the groups got smaller again, they'd grow and contract and grow and contract. In the periods where they got smaller, I would always feel more tired after the sessions. It's like why is it less fun, or why is it harder? Is it the game? And I think in a lot of cases it was the kind of this not caring, this not being there for the game part of it,
Oh, right,
or the I guess the real truth of it is the misalignment of purpose. Some of us were there to experiment with a game to see if we liked it, and we wanted to talk about the experience. We wanted to explore the experience, and other
right,
people were there to socialize. And you know that socializing aspect drained me, whereas the investigating the game part invigorated.
right. That
So,
totally makes sense. Yeah.
so identifying who you're playing with, that's I guess that's the part where I start to get cautious now and concerned, like who am I playing with? Will it be
Yeah.
fun?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's totally legitimate to find out before, because I mean, depending on how seriously you take this goal and this endeavor of getting what you want, it's worth, having long conversations with, and it shouldn't, no one should feel insulted, um, if
Mm,
you find out that you're playing at cross purposes. It's not some kind of a test for, how good of a human being are you. We just
right.
want very different things. Yeah. And so, if you want to be friends and hang out and do other things, there are more things in the universe than role playing,
But
contrary
your
to my
tongue.
own. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, it's true.
Yeah. So I mean, it's totally legit to have conversations and to conclude. I don't think we could play this game because I want X and you want, you know you may want eight different things, but they're not X, and it's fine if we don't play together. It's not a
Right.
slight. Yeah.
And contrary to my own example, though I do like playing with new people. Like playing with new people. The socializing aspect is harder for me because I'm shy. But
Yeah.
the playing part, I really enjoy playing with new people because I'm always hoping that they're going to show me something, that they're going to bring something, and or they're going to work with work with the system, or they're going to work with a classic role playing challenge like multiple characters in a scene, conversing with each other, or rapid description or deep description, or they're going to present some skill that that I can marvel at, or that that I can be inspired and want to model or try myself, or expose me to something I'd never thought of before. I'm always hopeful for that.
Hmm.
And so that's the counterbalance. My instinct is to not meet people, and my learned experience is that I really should. And somewhere in the middle has been my long years of gaming.
Right. Yeah.
So, all right, we have been talking about a particular type of play which is less common, right? And perhaps because it's less common, is more challenging. Right? It's like going back to the beginning in many ways. We're gonna have to unlearn some habits and then rebuild some habits. So not just learn new rules and not just adopt a different style of play and not just play on a specific layer of play, but actually take away all the things that you associate with a role playing game and go back to ostensibly how it was played early on, from 74, 75, 76, with the game master controlling the dice, right? And you are controlling your actions and your descriptions, but the system is occurring entirely behind the screen.
Yeah. That's where I've gone. Yeah.
Yeah. So then this is going to seem like work to some people. Like, oh, I don't know if I could, because they're thinking like a game master maybe. Like if I play this way and I like it, then I'm going to want to do it, and I don't think I can do it. So
Yeah.
I don't even want to experience it.
Yeah, I get
Or
it. Yeah. And I also, I mean, this is like we were talking before where, I would I've been playing all this time, but the actual prospect of producing it and publishing it was I would be convinced for years it was, frivolous. And it's probably true, but now I'm going to do it anyway. But yeah, I mean, I get all of the obstacles and like whenever I publish it, I'm not requiring the players. I'm not going to come to your house and make sure you play this way. All right. Uh, I really don't give a shit about your life, so do what you want. Um, but I'm also presenting the rules in such a way that if you don't do full opacity, I'm still explaining the rules in that way. I'm essentially gonna write out the rules the way I played it, except for the past like 3 years. Because
right,
before then, I was around that 70% mark, and obviously we loved it. Um, but I mean, why wouldn't I share that? For those who want the same thing I want, I think I found something important and I think it's full opacity. So I'm going to present
yeah,
that. And I know that hardly anyone picks up any indie system, um, regardless. Yeah. And mine being so different is going to have even fewer people. I get it. And so be it. But
well,
yeah.
you never know. Like uh, friends of mine have recently released a game. They've been working on it for a number of years. I think they were slowed down by COVID, as were we all. Right,
Yeah.
but they've recently released it. It's on full release now. It's called The Dark Age of Man. It's by Candlelight Games, and so a lot of people that I regularly play with get together on the many nights when I'm not available to play, and they've been playing it. So Ivan of the Ivan Mike 1968 channel's been running it. The two guys who wrote it have been doing live commentary of their play as they go through. It's been pretty interesting.
Hmm.
But um, this system innovates and guides players, game master and players alike, into a stance where improvisation is one of the core tenets of what they're supposed to do. They're going to be given a random prompt, and they're supposed to be able to work it in to how things are working.
Hmm.
And the players are contributing to the experience in that way also. And there's a real sense of being as descriptive as possible. So, watching their actual play in one of the first sessions, um, the host of the Umbermancer channel, Aloy Centron, he was playing a mystical character, right? There's a priest who also has access to priestly magic kind of ability, but he's more of the wizardly type, the learned, right, esoteric lore kind of thing. And
Hmm.
what it occurred to him to do, he's a native Spanish speaker who's fully fluent in English, but none of the other players um, are speakers of Spanish. So it occurred to him that he'd be using magical lingo, which he understood what it meant, but that other people would just be hearing the sounds for. And so his spell casting is him describing the spell in Spanish.
Nice.
It it's very effective. It's effective as an audience member. It was effective as a fellow player. Um, if joined by other Spanish speakers, I'm not sure how effective it would be. But I mean, apart from
Hmm.
actually learning a magical language, Um,
Right.
I'm going to study Esperanto so I can play role-playing games better.
Right.
Uh, I think it's just a really beautiful way to make it happen. And then
Hmm.
all of that stuff, like I cast a spell,
Right.
disappears.
Right.
And it becomes the experience of casting the spell, both for him, he's really inside that experience, and for them. So I think
That's interesting.
that there are traces of this kind of play. There are traces of the spectrum of in character play out there.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so hard to guess, but even from just looking at YouTube or Twitter, I think that the appetite for something like we're describing is stronger than it was, let's say, 5 years ago. Or maybe it's more vocal than it was. I don't know. But I think one of the reasons that I'm proceeding with publishing Primeval Fantasy is because I do see enough hope that I think there are a handful of people who will enjoy it and
Yeah,
try things. So I think the appetite's out there.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we always have the opportunity to introduce new people to their favorite food for the first time. So,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's
all
right.
right. Well, on that uplifting note, let's draw this conclusion or this conversation to a close. And thank you again for joining me, Daniel. It's been a lot of fun to chat.
Yeah, I always love chatting and love your videos. Always good meat in there to chew on.
Thanks. All
Yeah,
right. So I look forward to getting together again for another meaty conversation in the future.
awesome.
But until then,
All right.
take care.
All right, you too.